Hey guys, welcome back to another Vanguard video. Today it's Alcasal Tuesday. We're looking at the brand new rideline used by Suina from the Skyride Manga in DZ-BT12 Chasm of Lost Souls. Really love the card design and art, so let's get right into it. So here's the Alcasal starter with the auto when rode upon if you went second to draw one. Next up is Raising Idea Alcasal. I'm going to be saying this name a lot. I like to call him Alcasal, but I know it's Alcasal technically. So auto, when placed by riding from Alcasal, cost reveal a grade 3 with Alcasal. It is card name for your ride deck, so you're grade 3. And then put an Idealize Queen Fort token into your order zone. Now this token set order is really good. It has the act in order zone if you have Vanguard with Alcasal, so it's immediate turn 1 obviously. You cost Restless card, perform while falling. You choose a normal unit from drop and put it into your soul, and you have a lot of call from soul, so this is basically easy. Drop to soul and then call to your rearguard circle recursion. And then the other skill is you get to check top 7, choose up to 1 card from among them, put into your soul and shuffle your deck. If this card was put into your order zone this turn, you choose up to 2 cards instead of 1. So essentially you get 2 soul, then 1 soul, then 1 soul going up to your turn 3. So on turn 1 you decked in 2, then decked in 1 every turn after that. You have easy search for your queen orders from the ride line as well as from your grade 3 on plays, but this just makes it really easy to thin your deck selectively. So free deck thin every turn can take that, and you do have a lot of drop recursion into your soul from the other grade 2, but in case you don't find that, you do have this order zone effect as well. Next up, we have the grade 2 Strive Idea Alcasal. When placed by riding from Raising Idea Alcasal, cost reveal grade 3 with Alcasal and its card name for your ride deck. Search your deck for up to 1 Queen's Order card, reveal it, and put it into your hand, shuffle your deck. There's a Blitz and a normal Queen's Order card, so you can search for either. I'm going to go over them right now. First off, we have Signalize Queen's Order, and this is the normal order. So if you have a Vanguard with Alcasal and its card name, you can play this cost with Counterblast 1. So Counterblast 1 is a bit hefty because your Vanguard skill spoiler also uses CB1, but we'll talk about that more later. You put this card into your soul, choose up to 2 cards with different card names from each other from your soul, call them to rearguard circle, and you get, if you have 10 or more cards in your soul, all of your front row units get +5 until end of turn. So continuous red text, really nice that it buffs up Vanguard. If you have Philia and Vanguard, because just spoilers, the Vanguard doesn't gain any additional power, you'll usually be hitting 26, 31. But getting the 10 soul is kind of a little bit high rolly. It's not super consistent, I would say, without playtesting first, just because you do get 4 soul going up to 5 from the order, and you do really need to see the grade 2 and a bunch of Philia to get the 10. Not to say it's hard at all, but after thinking about it a little bit more, it is a little bit tough, so it's not super consistent. The only cards that get you soul early that plus you really is the Blitz order and the new grade 2. This card technically isn't really plussing you soul because you do have to call out a soul, but this card is just insane in terms of value. You can call Philia and Orions. I do feel like you do really want Orions for the early game, but if you don't get the CB, you aren't able to play this, so maybe this deck might have to play the Youthquake or order that does soul charge and draw, just to kind of substitute without having the CB, so you have a grade 2 turn play. But in the late game, this card is amazing. You'll have, 5k to your front row units. For the turn, you are a multi-attack deck, so this is value. I do kind of wish it was +10 if your opponent was grade 3 or greater, but this can proc basically when you go first. So when you do hit the 10 soul, you'll be hitting pretty hard numbers going first. But yeah, the big value from this is definitely the new units that we'll talk about later. The mate as well as the grade 2 that gets you soul, crit, shove to soul. And of course, Philia and Orions will always be mad value in this deck. Philia will just shove back to soul, draw 1, retaining your soul, so you're at 10 on your grade 3 turn. And of course, playing your normal order for turn will of course proc Philia, and Orions is just able to fill out a board. And really, there's actually no other soul blast unless you're playing Orions in this deck, which is kind of funny. Honestly, once you hit the 10 to 15 soul, you're kind of like just chilling with this deck. You don't really need to deck thin any further besides your selective deck thin from the token set order. But yeah, this card's very simple, very good. Because it does go to soul, you are technically minusing 1 soul by playing this because CB1, shove to soul, call 2. But overall, if you are calling Philia or anything else, you pretty much go even on soul because they'll go back to soul, or you'll find a way basically to fill up your soul from on places anyway. So honestly, really solid card. Next up, we have Vitalize Queen Shield. You can play this if you have Vanguard with Alcasal and its card name. Put this unit into soul and you may soul charge 1. So you may soul charge 1 clause, very nice for the late game. Then choose up to 1 unit card from your soul without Sentinel, and if it isn't an over trigger, call it to Guardian Circle. It gets shield +5 until end of battle. If you called a unit with Lielua in its card name, it gets shield +10 instead of +5. So Lielua is the mate of this deck, a very unique rear guard. It has 10k power but 20k shield, so really nice to guard with in the early game. So if you call this out the Blitz order, it's a 30k shield. So really good not to get rushed early game. If your opponent also has, an 18k swinging, if you slam down Lielua onto the Guardian Circle, it's really good for guarding because obviously you'll be hitting, 30, 28. So it'll be OT past, to whatever column your opponent's swinging at. So I think having a 20k shield in the early game is really nice, especially when it comes to, the early game where we have 13k boosters like Shenri, Surgon, Philia that will just beat your face early. So getting behind in the early game is really hard, especially when you get rushed, because it gets a lot of momentum for your opponent, especially when you get to higher damage. So I think having a 20k shield in Splits order is really nice. And the Yume Soul Charge cause is basically to get that soul early, because you basically go even on soul if you call out from soul to Guardian Circle. So having that Yume Soul Charge 1 gets you your soul early, so you can reach reach that 10 and basically have that additional effect for your rears and whatnot that we'll talk about later. So honestly, really good card. Also, if you do call any effect heals off this, you do get the extra shield. Do kind of wish that there was a little bit more of a cool gimmick here besides just Lielua, or if you had a little bit more optional in terms of blitz, but it's still really good blitz order regardless, you know, getting that extra shield +5. If you call trigger 20k shield, if you call Lielua, it's 30k shield. Call an effect heal, you know, still 30k shield, which is really nice. So honestly, still really solid card all around. And again, having that Yume Soul Charge clause is very nice. Finally, for the Vanguard themselves, we have Eternal Idea Alcasal. So auto, when this card is placed on Vanguard Circle, search your deck for up to 1 Queen's Order card. So you can search either the Blitz or the normal order. Reveal it, put it into your hand, and shuffle your deck. If you Persona Road this turn, you search for up to 2 instead of 1. It does really hurt that it doesn't search from drop for some reason, but still really solid card nonetheless. You're basically always guaranteed your Queen Order cards off your Rideline and then this, and then obviously on Persona Ride, you'll grab 1 of each. Then auto Vanguard Circle once per turn. When this unit attacks, you cost counterblast 1. Choose a card from your soul and call it to Rearguard Circle. If your opponent's Vanguard is grade 3 or greater, you choose up to 2 cards with different card names from each other instead of 1. When you would call to Rearguard Circle, you can have those units overcalled by the ability, put into soul instead of going into drop. So very similar to Alden, instead of, you know, going into drop, instead of going to hand, they're going into soul. And it's a Yume clause, so you can, you know, send them to drop if you would like. But obviously, most of the time, it will go back to soul, so you can, you know, keep retaining your soul. Usually at 10 to 15, so you can be using cards that we'll look at later, such as the really strong grade 2, and potentially Querga, which I'll talk about later as well. But honestly, overall, very simple Vanguard. I do kind of don't like that there's no energy blasting here. The only card that actually energy blasts in this deck is a grade 1 we'll look at later that gets the Gauge and Armed for the signature mate of this deck. But overall, I would say it's a little bit CB heavy. The fact that you have to CB essentially for the order every turn, and then for Vanguard skill, if you aren't CBing for the order, you're not plussing, you're also not getting the power, and you don't really have a lot of draw besides the grade 2 that you call out of soul. So overall, I think the deck looks really cohesive. I'll talk more about my thoughts on the deck at the end, but looking at just the Vanguard, it's still quite strong. Being able to grab basically both of your Blitz orders, both your Blitz and your normal order on your Persona Ride turn, as well as also being able to just do multi-attacks while also plussing is really, really strong. So definitely do need to play the normal order for a turn if you do want to plus and basically have a full board. But overall, I would still say this deck still looks really, really cohesive for first wave support. And this is without getting to the really strong rear guards. So next up, we have another triple rare of the deck, which is Demonic Sword of Awakening Welkaina. This is definitely one of the best cards of the deck. As the continuous, if you have Vanguard with Alcasal in its card name, it gets all the following, and there's 3 skills here. So the first is auto when placed on Rearguard Circle, you may soul charge 1. If you did not soul charge, you can choose a card from drop and put into soul. So this is really nice drop to soul recursion on top of your set order. Usually you're using the set order deck, then out of deck, so you can increase your chance of hitting triggers. But still, you know, you may randomly soul charge 1 if you do want to gamble on finding a piece. Then is the continuous Rearguard Circle during your turn. If your soul has 10 or more cards, it gets power +5. Next up, we have the auto Rearguard Circle ability. When it attacks, if this unit was placed by your Vanguard's ability this turn, it gets power +5 until end of battle. Then if your soul has 10 or more cards, until end of battle, this unit gets auto Rearguard Circle. At the end of the battle, this unit attacked. You may put this unit into your soul, and if you put it into soul, you draw a card. Then if your soul has 15 or more cards, it gets crit +1 until end of battle. Honestly, surprised they didn't slap another +10, but if you are counting the +5 from the auto and then +5 from the cont, and then also +5 from the normal order you play for turn, that's 25. Persona turns 35, Philia boost 48. So unfortunately, they haven't revealed really a good booster in this deck besides Philia. Obviously, Philia was used in the Skyride manga and is definitely one of the best cards you have to kind of play in this deck, especially because you need the soul and a better 13k boost. But because you're playing a normal order every turn, or you should be, you know, if you have the CB, hopefully, then, you know, you're going to be getting these conditions off very easy and making decent numbers. So you have soul draw from Philia, soul and draw from this, and of course that crit pressure is really good. And your other side with the mate is going to be really, really big because of the other card we're going to look at. So honestly, really solid card. Also great to slam in the early game just to get more soul. If you don't want to randomly soul charge from deck, you can just grab from drop back to soul, which is really nice because you do have ways to grab your Queen Order cards from soul, or just simply to be able to have pieces in your soul to call off Alcasal or off other cards in the late game. So yeah, I think this card is really good. The thing is with Orions is that you will Soul Blast and kind of, you know, lose soul out, but at least this kind of supplements that. But if you do see a lot of Welkaina early as well as Philia, you'll definitely be able to reach the 10 soul pretty easily by turn 3. Now we finally have the last card, which is Penetration Gargoyle Venesgalza. So auto, when this card is placed on Rearguard Circle, you cost Energy Blast 3, choose a Queen's Order from your soul, put it into your hand, and soul charge 1. Kind of hurts that you have to soul charge 1. It's not you may, but this is a really good card in the early game. You can put any card from your check top 7 off the token set order into your soul. So being able to basically shove in any of your Queen's card into your soul, then be able to grab it back off this card and soul charge 1 is really, really good. It's really easy also to slam this guy in the early game, and if he does die, obviously you can just shove him back from drop back into soul and call him back out if you really, really need to. Then he has a really strong ability, a new keyword, Arma Arms. So auto Rearguard Circle, Arma Arms. When your unit with Lielua in its card name is placed on another rearguard circle in the same column as this unit during your battle phase, you may put this unit face up as that unit's armor gauge. So gauge is basically associated with the unit and put on the same circle. So auto when this card is put in the gauge zone by the Arma Arms ability, until the end of your opponent's next turn, that unit and this card as armor gauge gets continuous rearguard circle. This unit cannot be chosen by your opponent's card effects. So choosing rearguard circle will target it, but obviously the units can't be targeted. It's basically resist. Then for each card in your soul, it gets power plus 1k, and if your opponent's Vanguard's grade 3 greater, it gets plus 2k for each instead of plus 10. So you'll be plus 10 if your opponent's on grade 2, and then once your opponent hits grade 3, you'll be getting plus 20 and really, really massive. Eventually you'll scale to like 50, 60. So your mate on side will be massive, and the other side with the 1 crit will be a little bit smaller, assuming, again, we talked about the numbers before. It'll probably be around 25, 13, so 38 and 48 on Persona Ride turns. You know, this is assuming you get the plus 5 from the normal order. But yeah, your side will be massive because it's very similar. I don't want to compare it to Dragon, but that's like the first card that pops into mind. Really, it's closer to something in like Dark States. I'm kind of not really thinking of something off the top of my head. I guess Assassin would be like the thing from Premium. But yeah, power 1k for every card in Soul is pretty crazy, and spirals pretty fast. Plus 2k once your opponent's grade 3 is really nice. You basically always will hit over defensive if you have the normal order live. I do think it's a little bit tricky though if you are playing this deck, just because you want to play your normal order every turn, and that's a CB, that you will want to play cards like Amethyst and Selfish Engraver, which I'll talk about at the end after I finish discussing this card. But yeah, honestly, there isn't really too much to say about this card besides the gauge effect is really good. Either you're in the early game or late game, you'll scale really well. It is a little bit awkward because you don't really want to overcall this. Basically, what you want to do is boost with it, and then obviously overcall to the front row, and then have this guy gauged up. Have that column set up for your mate, which will be really big. Or sorry, not the column, technically just the front row rearguard circle, and then your column of the grade 2 rear with a crit, and the Philia will hopefully be a lot bigger. But yeah, overall, I would say the numbers for this deck don't seem that great, and I think the CP problem is definitely there. But besides that, I think the deck is super cohesive for a first wave of support and looks really fun. So the first card I want to bring up in deck building is the Soul and Fronts. I think these are going to be solid options. Of course, you can play up to 4, or you could play 3 and then 8 crits. And because you have the 20k shield mate, playing 15k Soul and Fronts aren't that bad. And you can always use the Soul and Front to call from Soul off the Blitz order and then shove back to Soul. So essentially getting you +1 on Soul or +2, because you basically Soul charged 1, put it from Soul to Guardian Circle, and then shoved it back in. And, you know, in the early game, having that 15k shield and 20k shield and being able to shove your Soul in from the trigger from Guardian Circle is really nice. So overall, I just think being able to guard early and being able to recur it onto the Guardian Circle through the Blitz order and just getting that Soul back is really nice. It'll make getting to 9 and then 10 really easy. I'm not sure if you'll exactly be hitting 15 by turn 3, but I think 15 is very realistic for turn 4. But yeah, Soul and Front's definitely a very solid deck building option for this deck. So in terms of deck building, the cards I want to talk about are Darfald, Finley, and of course Pony. These are cards you can be playing just to shove into Soul and then bind to get that Soul Charge 2 to try and give a little bit more consistency for hitting your Soul on turn 2. I think in terms of deck space, it is really tight. You won't be able to really play a playset of either, and obviously Finley is just the better card to play, but I think it's just a really cool card to bring up nonetheless, and it could help a little bit with the consistency of the deck, but I think overall you'd rather go with cards that countercharge instead. As I said before, this deck counterblasts a lot, so you're definitely going to need cards like Amethyst or maybe even Selfish Engraver, because hitting that 10 soul isn't too hard. It just might not be the most consistent thing in the world by turn 3. Again, you're getting a lot of soul off the set order, your grade 2 off Philia. It's just, in terms of finding the Blitz orders, it's like basically guaranteed off your ride line, but unless you play 2 in a consecutive turn, you're still like 1 soul off. Technically, you're +1ing soul if you are activating the Yume soul charge effect off the Blitz order, and then of course you basically have your soul from riding up. You get basically 4 soul if you're counting grade 3 turn from your set order. So honestly, hitting the soul isn't too hard for the 10 for Selfish Engraver, but I'm just not sold in Selfish Engraver because it's not really doing much else besides having the on-hit soul charge pressure, which could make a difference, don't get me wrong, but I think Amethyst is just a safer thing, and Amethyst obviously in the late game is also just a 20k shield, and if you are playing 2, you don't mind really losing 1 because in the late game it can come up for that counter charge or for that extra shield so you survive. But yeah, I think overall this deck definitely needs counter charge. It's really hard to find the deck space. I think you definitely want to play maybe 7 of the Queen orders, maybe like 4 of the Blitz, 2, 3 of the normal. It's kind of hard to say. I think 3 is probably like the lowest you want to go to, but because you have to search from deck, if you aren't able to search from deck, kind of similar to like Ava, once you run out of research orders, you kind of are just losing out on the plus for the on plays. But overall, I still think the deck is very cohesive in terms of finding your orders. Like, it's really hard to whiff them, and just having that counter charge kind of adds more like consistency to the deck, especially if you get damage denied. Because on your first turn, if you're in the Teeth Vault situation where you only get 1 CB and you burn it on the normal order for turn, then all of a sudden going into your next turn, you don't have any basically CB for your on attack Vanguard skill. Since all your energy is going towards the Gargoyle, you have lots of space for energy blasting in the early game, so I think Tizcar could be a very solid option at 2 to 3, maybe 4, but I doubt you have the deck space for it. Same for the Ace unit. I think the Ace unit is super strong in this deck. Having that insane early game with the normal order and the Ace unit can probably just blow up your opponent in one turn. You do like Philia Orans, make a board, Ace units, whatever, like you are just chilling and you have like so much cycle from your deck to draw one. I think definitely, again, the CB is a problem if you didn't get 2 CB, because again, if you play that your 1 CB per turn on the normal order, like we talked about before, you could get damage denied. But I think for the most part, this deck has a very easy time rushing your opponent, making board. Your turn 3 numbers aren't the greatest, at least going second, but I think going into the turn, you have the Gargoyle gauge, which will make your unit like pretty massive. So I think you'll still have a chance to make a comeback. Obviously, I think Heartluru is obviously looking way better in this deck after 2 waves of support, but I think this deck still looks really fun and unique, and I absolutely just adore it. So going back to Orions again, because it's Soul Blast early, you're kind of at a really weird soul count in the early game, but it's another way basically to fish for Philia, and you have no way actually to Soul Blast in this deck once you get to 10, 15. Once you hit 15, you don't really have a reason to really get any more soul besides obviously scaling up your gauge for the Gargoyle, but being able to Soul Blast cards out for drawing 1 for Orions is really nice when you attack grade 3 or greater, but obviously on your turn 3, you do want the 10 soul, kind of just have that scaling, especially with the normal order as well. You're not really getting that additional power for your other rear unless you do, have that 10 or more soul. So I do think you might want cards that are a little bit more consistent for that. But I still see a world where like Orions is really strong just for that early game to just kind of win harder, because Orions, Philia, normal order for turn is still always going to be strong, and you're basically guaranteed your queen order. Either your normal order, you are basically guaranteed your normal order to play with Orions on turn 2, just to kind of, make a board and rush down your opponent and, get a lot of resources. And if you are scared of damage now, you can instead just not play normal for turn and search the Blitz order instead. Another really cool card that I saw from a JPT was Cutting Sword Dance Querga, and while I think Querga would be really cool in this deck, especially for the 13 or more +5, getting that power until end of turn, essentially you can have Persona Ride for +5/+5, 5 from Querga, 5 from the normal order, and you can basically salvage any PG from Soul to your hand for CB1 pitch, which is really cool. I think Querga could be a really neat tech in this deck if you do have the space, maybe at 1 or 2, kind of similar to how it was in Barrow. But it is a little bit consistent, and you do have to spend that CB, in the late game, which does really hurt because you don't have much CB to work with. You want to spend that 1 CB on Van and 1 on the normal order to plus, essentially. So I think Querga could be really cool in the high roll just to kind of close out the game. And it's a really cool card to salvage anything you want from your soul back to your hand, such as a PG or whatever you need. So I think Querga is still quite a unique card, and I guess you could technically salvage a CC, but that would kind of defeat the purpose of paying the cost. But I think it's a really cool card to bring up that I did see in a JP tweet. So want to bring that up for people who might want to be cooking with this deck and proxy playtesting. But yeah, that pretty much wraps up all my thoughts for Alcasal. Do let me know what you think of the deck, of course. Next week, we have Brawler Big Bang Knuckle, so be there or be square. Going to be quite an exciting D-Legion encounters reveal. And we also have the anime live stream announcements for basically the entire voice acting cast that are going to be doing a stream for that as well next week. So quite the exciting news for Cardfight Vanguard. And then, of course, going into January, we will have the 15th anniversary live stream. But yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. If you did enjoy, of course, like and subscribe. Do let me know what you think of the Alcasal reveals. I think, honestly, the deck is really solid for a first wave of support. Nothing too crazy. I wouldn't say it's definitely as cohesive as Heartluru. And again, you have those little bit small problems in terms of consistency for reaching the 10 soul as well as the CB for Alcasal. But I think overall, it's still going to be a very strong, probably solid tier 2 deck like we saw for We're Gonna Guess. But anyways, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you again in another Vanguard video.